President Donald Trump signed an executive order late Thursday to end public funding of National Public Radio and PBS to stop what he called, quote, biased and partisan news coverage.
Joining us now is our chief legal analyst, Khalif Rhodes. Khalif, what's the big interest in what's going on with this? This is, man, just every day it's something that we necessarily weren't expecting.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what NPR and PBS has done. Sesame Street and all that comes on PBS. I'm confused, but with all jokes aside, I mean, you can look at the past. President Trump tried to do this in 2017. He recommended this as a budget proposal, wanted to cut it by like to $35 million. Their budget at that time was $445 million. If you break that down to every citizen, that's like $1.35 per citizen. But again, I don't have a crystal ball, but I can look at the history. In September, during his debate with Kamala Harris, President Trump said, I don't know what Project 2025 is, never read it, have no idea anything about it. It's a good idea. They have some good ideas and some bad ideas. Well, I guess this was a good idea. Turn to page 246, right in Project 2025. It's clearly in here. Corporation for Public Broadcast recommend cutting funding 100% for this because they believe it's partisan. They believe that it's not in the public interest, and they believe in their own writing that it's more liberal than conservative. They quote 60% liberal, so I guess those other 40 conservatives that watch this are not important because they're saying cut it, and this is something that they also wrote, what conservatives would thus reward a president who eliminates this tyrannical situation. PBS and NPR don't even bother to run programming. So those are the things that are ripped right from the pages, the same pages that he said he didn't even read.
Where does this stand in terms of, because I feel like we talk about this with you almost every day, powers of the executive, right? Powers of the legislative branch. Okay, so we're talking about funding that Congress has approved for certain programs, right? Does he have the power to even do this?
I think he has the power to attempt to cut down on to reorganize. So he would go to Congress to ask to reorganize. That's the first step. I think if the funds have already been appropriated by Congress, I think that Congress is the only authorization that has the only ability to cut it. What he's doing is also systematically doing other things. So he attempted also to gut their board. So they have a 5-member board. I'm going to remove 3 members. If I remove those 3 members, you guys can't even do any action. You won't have quorum to do any votes. They have now thus sued to try to figure out, well, does he even have authority to remove our board members? He did the exact same thing with the National Labor Relations. I removed 3 members. You don't have quorum. Thus, those also are ripped from the pages of Project 2025. So the playbook is there for what he's attempting to do. I'm not sure if he legally has the authorization, A, to remove those members so they don't have quorum, and B, to take the funding. I think this is a congressional act like he tried to do the last 2 times. In 2017 and in 2018, he tried to remove funding, limit funding, I should say, and both times Congress didn't pass a budget to wholeheartedly remove it like he's trying to do here.
Anytime we have these stories, Khalif, on a federal, national level, we also try to see it through the lens of how does this affect us locally, both in North and South Carolina. We've got North Carolina PBS stations as well, South Carolina as well. What does the trickle-down effect, what could this look like affecting North and South Carolina?
I mean, most of them are still going to have some, because all of their funding doesn't come from the federal government. So let's be clear. In this report, they recommended that, or they projected that 60+% of the funding comes from the federal government. But I read something from NPR and PBS that said only 16% of their funding comes from the federal government. But it still would be a major blow if you're expecting those dollars. And if they're any organization, then you're saying 16 to 60% is just not going to be there. So now how do you fund yourself? How do you go get money? I think, as I read before, the president of PBS has already said, we recognize that this was going to be an issue when he was reelected because he'd already done it in the past. So they've already been trying to figure out how can they position themselves. On the state level, it's the same exact way. These folks have recognized that this would be an issue. It wasn't something that was out of the blue. He has talked about it before. So now you have to reorganize and try to figure out, well, how do you move forward? At least for the next 3 years, we're trying to figure out where funding is going to come from.
Is there any recourse for NPR, for PBS to say, okay, this is an attack on the First Amendment, he can't do this because Congress has already approved the funding? What is the legal recourse? What's the next steps that NPR can
I think your first step is congressional, like it's the separation of powers. Congress appropriates funding. The president doesn't have the authority to take that funding if it's already appropriated. I think the second argument, as you hit on, is the First Amendment argument. If you're specifically chilling my speech and you're attempting to connect your chilling of my speech to dollars because you don't like my speech, I think it is a First Amendment argument, and you just would use what the White House has put out. White House press secretary said in a social media posting that the signing said the outlets received millions of taxpayer funding to spread radical woke propaganda disguised as news. So now you're saying that this is viewpoint, not neutral, but viewpoint specific, that you don't like their viewpoint, and because you don't like their viewpoint, I'm going to take your funding. It would sound retaliatory at best, and at the very worst, it would sound like something you can't legally do. So I think two arguments, congressional funding portion and the First Amendment portion, is the way that I would argue it. But I think that any court that looks at this would only have to address the congressional part. Sometimes you see that the court is given two questions. I don't think the court wants to touch the First Amendment portion, but the congressional portion, we're lining up from so many different angles that the court is going to have to address, well, who actually controls the purse? Is it Congress or is it the president? I think the Constitution says it's the Congress. But right now, we're having a challenge of saying, well, who actually controls it?
If you are the legal department for a university, for a program that has some kind of federal dollar connection, are you preparing your company, if you're the federal, I mean, if you're their legal counsel, going, we have not always aligned with the Trump administration in years past. This could be coming down the pike. We need to go ahead and prepare for what could be out there.
100%. I mean, I serve on a number of boards that have these conversations, and we were having them before President Trump was elected. And most of the organizations that I serve on say the same thing, that regardless of the administration, we have to ensure that we are compliant with whatever the law is. And so if the law is changing, if the law is evolving, you have to be in step with that if you want to keep and maintain your funding. So you can't do things that you may not agree with just because it's being disagreeable. You still have to be in compliance. And so there are a number of things that the president is doing through executive order that I think will be challenged. But things that are passed, that have become law, that are congressional actions, or they're within his executive power authorities, then for sure, these recommendations that they send, these letters that they send to these universities, trying to remove DEI and things like that, they're all being challenged throughout their process anyway. But I think universities and colleges are making the change to try to stay lock in step with what the president is doing and still be compliant with the nature of the businesses.
All right, this is not the last that we will hear of
No.
this. I'm sure we'll talk about it at the beginning of next week. Khalif, thanks. Appreciate it.